Hey there, everyone, and good afternoon. Josh Cantwell here, the CEO of Freeland Properties and the host of the Ohio Landlord Association. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm excited to be with all of you guys and try to deliver as much content as we can to our members, especially in the middle of this coronavirus sort of environment that we find ourselves in. So I know a lot of you were able to attend our kind of first Ohio Landlord Association event, which was back in March at the Fatheads Brewery, which was fun because we had almost 75, 100 attendees. We had a lot of people show up. We delivered a great presentation, and we were all able to see each other face to face, which was fun. Obviously, that a lot of things have changed. So the April event was moved to a virtual event, and David Streeter, who is one of our sponsors, was also our featured speaker. Today, I'm excited to introduce you guys to my good friend Jack Petrick from the Petrick Property Group, who is going to be our featured speaker today. And we're going to talk with Jack a little bit more about owning and managing and stabilizing income properties and apartments during the quarantine. So I've got a few housekeeping items to cover, but did want to welcome Jack onto the call. Jack, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
You bet, you bet. I wasn't going to show my webcam, but might as well show our webcams, Jack, for a minute real quick and just say hi to everybody. So I'm operating from my home office. So just want to say hi real quick to all of our members. Working from home today, doing a lot of investor updates, and hosting this webinar from my home office. I got my Browns hat on, and we're having a good time. So just wanted to turn on my webcam for a minute, say hello. There's Jack. For those of you guys that don't know, Jack hanging out in his home office as well. Jack and I actually live in Strongsville, live in the same neighborhood. I like to tell everybody that we're a beer and a half walk from my house to his. Jack's not a drinker, but I am. So I'm a Coors Light and a half away from Jack's house. And Jack and I have been friends for a long time. So, but did you want all of you guys, if you haven't been part of the Ohio Landlord Association or have never met before, I just want to welcome you. Maybe you found this on the internet, found this on social media, and decided to join us, and you haven't met myself or Jack before. Did want to quickly put a face to a name with the webcam. And then I'm gonna go ahead, Jack, and turn mine back off because it's a little bit of a distraction. But sounds good. All right, let me turn that sucker back off. There we go. All right, so Jack is going to be our featured presenter today. Here's our agenda. Again, we'll talk real quickly about my company, about Freeland. I'm not going to spend a ton of time introducing myself, but since I am the host and the CEO, just bump through that for 30 seconds and then introduce Jack. So my company, Freeland, if you haven't had exposure to us in the past, maybe this is your first Ohio Landlord Association event or your first meetup. We basically do three things. We manage capital, we own our own portfolio of properties, and then we lend and service our own loans. Okay. Now, in the middle of this coronavirus sort of pandemic, we've paused a lot of our lending. We're not closed, we're just paused at the moment because it's just a little bit unclear how this is all going to shake out and what's the proper pricing for lending. But for sure, what we're going to see over the next 2 to 18 months is an incredible opportunity to buy properties. For those of you that are paying attention, obviously there's a foreclosure moratorium right now. There's a lot of forbearance agreements happening. But there's obviously record unemployment happened in the last 4 weeks. There's going to be a lot of properties go into distress. There's going to be operators and real estate investors that struggle with their portfolio. There's going to be people who are not liquid, and they are going to need to sell. So my company is getting geared up to go on a buying spree. I know Jack's company is getting geared up to go on a buying spree. So we're raising a lot of private money. And also when the market sort of settles down and stabilizes, and I think that'll happen here in the next 30 to 60 days. Once everybody gets back to work, and things start to unfreeze, then we'll get back to work. Obviously, this is the Ohio Landlord Association, so you're all affected by Governor Mike DeWine's decisions. As of yesterday, we thought we were going to be reopening for business today. And then last night, literally in the shadow of the night, they signed a new executive order to keep businesses closed for the next 30 days. I don't know about you, but I'm fine with going on the record that my companies are open for business. We are doing business. We are out in the marketplace. We are looking at properties. Hopefully, we'll be able to start lending on properties again soon. Jack is out managing his deals, his business. Our employees, Jack's and mine, are both all working from home. And we're just managing through this as best we can, but we're doing a really darn good job of managing our way through it. And so I'm kind of sick of being under quarantine. I know Jack will comment on it as well. I'm kind of sick of being under quarantine. So regardless of what the rules are, our company is open for business, open for profits, and I'm sure you are as well. So Jack's going to be talking about that for the majority of our talk today. Before we jump in and I introduce Jack and do a really nice introduction for him, I do want to recognize some of our sponsors. One of our sponsors is David Streeter. David is a real estate attorney. David has been my real estate attorney for a long, long time. Also, he's been Jack's real estate attorney for a long, long time, doing a lot of the purchase agreements, landlord, tenant law, evictions, LLC formation, apartment contracts, real estate contracts, helping us understand real estate law, and he also does some estate planning as well. And so if you have a need for any kind of real estate transactional contracts, evictions, both residential and commercial apartments, please reach out to our sponsor, David Streeter. His phone number is 216-407-6644. You can also email him at dstreeter@deemerlaw.com. So just want to say thanks to David. We're going to go about 45 minutes today. And so again, just want to thank everybody for jumping on the line. And let me go ahead and introduce Jack. Jack and I have been friends for over 6 years. We actually met. My daughter Juliana and Jack's daughter Emma are really close friends, and they played little, 5-year-old, 6-year-old soccer together. And Jack and I became friends through soccer. We've coached soccer together. Jack's son and my son, Cole and Dominic, are very close friends. As a matter of fact, they're on their iPads playing Nintendo almost every night during this coronavirus business. And so Jack and I have known each other a long time. Combined, Jack and I have worked on about 350 units of apartments together. We own 164 units of apartments in Shaker Heights, Cleveland Heights. Jack is the majority general partner in that deal. He found the deal. I'm a minority general partner in that deal in Shaker Heights. But we've also funded well over another 150 units for Jack as a debt lender and an equity investor. And so Jack and I have had a good time together as personal friends and also doing a lot of deals together over the years. Jack right now, to give you an idea, currently owns over 650 units and has another 150 or so units under contract, and currently employs over 30 people in the Petrick property group. He has obviously contractors, property managers, office staff, leasing agents that work for him, managing his over 650 units. Jack is a retired firefighter, and just like a good firefighter, he invested in real estate on the side. A lot of firefighters that I know also invest in real estate on the side. He's a former custom home builder, and it's just a fantastic, authentic guy. So Jack, welcome to the call again, my friend. Thanks so much for making some time for the Ohio Landlord Association. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for attending and for taking some time out of your day to jump in with us and join the conversation.
Yeah, Jack, so before we jump into the kind of formal slides, why don't we just talk a little bit, kind of ham and egg a little bit, if you will, about what's going on right now with the market. Obviously, a lot of people are looking at May 1 today as a very important day for collections. These foreclosure moratoriums, the evictions, there was a lot of misinformation that came out in the middle of March and throughout April. So why don't you just start with telling our audience, how did collections go in April? Just what was on your mind as a pretty substantial apartment owner with all this information and misinformation that was coming out? And then secondly, tell us kind of what you're thinking for May. Like, obviously today's May 1st, and you're going to start processing a lot of rent payments today. So give us some background there first.
Absolutely. So before I made the transition to apartments, I felt apartments were a very safe and stable asset because it's been a proven business for hundreds of years. Everybody needs a place to live. As we have seniors that are getting into a position where their house is too much work or it's too challenging, they're transitioning to apartments. People that are going through a bankruptcy, a divorce, some undesirable situation are typically transferring to apartments. People that are graduating high school going to apartments. People that are coming out of college are going to apartments. So it's been an asset class that I felt that's a safe investment. And even in a time of recession, it's been, it was a safe investment in 2008. So when all this happened, which is obviously brand new ground for all of us, I wasn't 100% sure how everything was going to shake out, but our collections for the month of April were the same as any other month. We had a few tenants that were late. They communicated with us. We worked with them for sure, considering the circumstances. We had a handful of tenants that we had to process evictions on, and these are people that we made efforts, we made payment plans, we provided opportunities. They've just failed to provide any effort. But I mean, overall, it was a normal month for us. Part of that I really feel was because we were buying the right properties in the right locations. We have, we really were proactive at the management level, reaching out to tenants, communicating with them. For about a quarter of our portfolio, we got gift cards to a local grocery store and sent them out to people. And again, we were being proactive with our tenants. So I think all of that combined was really helpful in that being a success for us.
There you go. That's great. Obviously in April, early part of April, Jack, a lot of the layoffs weren't happening quite yet. So the last 4 weeks has been record historic unemployment.
Sure.
But at the same time, a lot of the PPP loans are now getting approved. A lot of the stimulus checks are going out. People are getting some money from the government. They're starting to receive, if they got laid off, they're getting unemployment. In a lot of cases, the federal government is giving them additional dollars on top of the state unemployment. So some people could actually be ahead of the game being unemployed because of the stimulus and the federal money on top of the state money. And so what have you continued to do to kind of get ready for May? Are you anticipating, based on your conversations with tenants and your management team, are you anticipating the same collections, better collections, worse collections? Any major change here in May?
So for us, I think personally, we're probably going to see some additional tenants that are going to have some challenges, but overall, I still am very confident with the position we're in and where we're going to be in rent collections. I actually was on the phone about 3 times yesterday with David Strader. I'll just put a plug in for David real quick. David has been absolutely amazing to work with. Every single deal that we have purchased, the contract has went through David. If all these larger deals that we're buying are going through a multifamily specific broker, like Marcus & Millichap or other companies that specifically focus on commercial. And I always like to have David prepare the contract, and then we go back and forth on that versus the broker preparing the contract. But the reason I was talking to David yesterday is we do have some tenants that are making zero effort to pay rent. And this was even going on before this happened. And we had to come up with some creative solutions on how we were able to process through those evictions because of the CARES Act. There are a number of tenants we're not able to evict right now during this time, but there are some workarounds that we're able to do. And again, we do have a heart for people. You know, if there's an effort being made, if communication's being kept, if agreements are being followed, we will work with people. But there's always going to be some tenants that are just flat out going to take advantage of the situation. So those couple tenants that we have going on, and we may have a few more of those coming up next month. David's provided some great insights to help us work through those situations. So again, to answer your question, I do expect rent collection still to be greater than 90%, and we'll just work through it. And but I was actually talking to Marcus Millichap yesterday, Charlie Gagliano, and we are talking about retail. And right now, retail, again, like shopping malls and strip centers, they're only collecting about 20% of rents right now. And Charlie was just checking with me to see how my rent collections are going. And he was reaching out to all of his customers who own hundreds or thousands of apartments. And even going to all these other apartment owners, they've had the same results that we have, where they have also been highly successful in collecting most of their rent last month.
That's fantastic. You know, Jack, I think, again, you have to pick the right asset class.
Sure.
That is really weatherproof. The numbers that I've heard, the research that we've done, you know, even during 2008, 9, and 10, when the whole world financial economy was really in trouble, the eviction rate or the non-paying rate and the occupancy rate for multifamily was still in the high 80s, 86, 88, 89%. And that just proves what a recession-proof investment it is. Before we jump into some of your slides, Jack, why don't you just talk for a second again about your strategy for buying at a wholesale price? Because a lot of people look at apartments and they look at traditional syndication, buying a property essentially at full price, and buying it purely for cash flow. And then when there is evictions or is some occupancy challenges, then they have a hard time paying investors. They have a hard time paying their equity investors, their cash flow returns or their preferred returns, versus in a lot of your cases and a lot of the apartments that we own, we would have to see like 25 to 30% vacancy for us to really have the asset be at risk, versus other deals where they're buying at a 5 cap or something like that, where they might have, if they have 15% vacancy, they're at risk. So just talk to that for a minute, and then we'll jump into the formal slides.
Absolutely. So there's basically two strategies in apartments. You can buy value-add properties. You can buy stabilized properties under a syndication model. So I have a heavy preference on focusing on value-add opportunities. I'm very, very comfortable as an operator of those opportunities because we've done so many of them. And so basically, a value-add opportunity is a property that has a number of deficiencies where we can increase the value of the property. So commercial apartment buildings are valued based upon net operating income, which is nothing more than income minus expenses. So we're specifically seeking out properties that have low occupancy, low rents, deferred maintenance, absentee owners, poor third-party management, either one or a multiple of those scenarios. So basically, I've got a spreadsheet, and I will put all the income and expenses in the left column, representing what the current income, current expenses are. Typically, we should be somewhere between a 40 to a 50% expense ratio. If the expense ratio is very low, not all of the expenses are being reported. If you've got a building where it's a mom and pop owner and they do everything, the repairs, maintenance, grass cutting, snow plowing, they do it all, they're going to show an unexpected low expenses. So, or vice versa, if the expenses are running high, I'm trying to determine why the expenses are high. So then I have a right column on the spreadsheet, and that is going to be my pro forma. In every single building and property we buy, we go through, we renovate every unit to raise rents. We're looking at other streams of income. Can we add pet fees? Could we add laundry income? Can we eliminate the third-party laundry company, which oftentimes, most of those contracts are supposed to be 50-50, but you realistically receive a very small amount of revenue out of those. So we kick all the third-party laundry contracts out, and we build the income as high as possible. Then on the expense side, we're aggressively bringing down expenses. We're putting materials and products into the property that allow us to minimize our turnover costs. We're reducing water and sewer usage, electric, utilities. So at the end of the day, we have a higher net operating income, and then we can refinance in a period of 2 years or less and pay all investors back all their capital, but they still get to stay in the deal. So in a nutshell, it's as simple as we're buying at a wholesale price because there's financial inefficiencies. We improve those financial efficiencies, refinance the property, return capital to investors, and then we take that investor's capital, and then we can put into another deal.
That's fantastic, Jack. That's great. Thanks for clarifying that. And so, again, you got very proactive. We'll talk a little bit more about management, but buying at the right price. So, just take us through when you say buying at the right price. Obviously, I love this deal in the Heights because I'm an owner of it with you. An amazing portfolio. So we talk about buying at the right price. Just give them an example of what did you pay for that deal? What is it going to be worth once it's stabilized? And the ability to refinance. Because again, a lot of people look at apartments and say, well, there's this deal, it's going to be a syndication and I can buy it and I'm going to get cash flow. But they don't understand really, like, what does that mean buying at a wholesale price versus buying for cash flow and then hoping for appreciation over the next 5 years because of rent bumps and because you're in the path of progress. You don't really buy where there's necessarily like population growth or in the path of progress, hoping for appreciation. So again, maybe use the Heights deal as an example.
Sure. So yeah, we're hoping for the path of progress, hoping for job growth, hoping for appreciation is not, I'm not putting financial metrics on that. If we can benefit from those items, that's great. But I want to be able to have a more controllable outcome on the property by being able to make calculated financial decisions. So this is a property we were able to pick up off market. I built a relationship up with Marcus and Millichap. We lost the deal initially. I was bummed about it, but moved on with it. We're able to close in the next deal, and after that, it just opened up the floodgates from there. So this property was brought to me, 164 units. There was a family in a private family had owned this complex. It's actually 8 separate buildings, 164 units in Shaker Cleveland Heights. The property was for sale at this point for $9.2 million, so somewhere in the 50s per door. And most recently, we have comps of about $83,000 per door. But what really made it very attractive for us is we had the ability to grow rents in this property. The gentleman that owned it was about 70 years old with his wife. They did a great job with the property, but the kitchens and bathrooms are a little bit outdated. So we were able to do a very light remodel to them, raise rents, lower expenses, and we're looking at the property being valued somewhere around $14 million by the time we're done with that.
That's fantastic. So, Jack, why B class assets versus C class, which a lot of people could argue have better cash flow, or A class assets that are maybe more stabilized or newer? Why focus on B?
Sure. So A-class assets, I like A-class assets, but when you're buying a newer property, those properties are typically running as efficiently as possible. They're newer, they're not in need of updating, and even if they are, there's not enough room in the deal to be able to make those improvements. Typically, those properties rent themselves, and they're also the most expensive properties in the market. So when people go through a financial setback, oftentimes they may not be able to afford that $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 rent, or like in Ohio City, like an A-class apartment can run a couple $1,000s. So, typically those tenants are gonna be looking to pull back to get into something that's a bit more affordable. With B-class apartments in B-class areas, we have more of a blue-collar working class tenants that are just financially more responsible. When I got started into buy and hold properties, my focus was Maple and Garfield Heights, because at that time I was able to buy properties as low as $4,000, and I was buying at such a distressed price point that it made financial sense because I had so much cash flow that I can afford the financial challenges with evictions, domestic violence, move outs, and those situations that happen. But in a C-class asset, you're going to have a lot more challenges with the tenant base. And the only way to offset those challenges is to buy at a much, much lower price point, have a much higher cap rate, and have more cash flow. But unfortunately, what I've seen through the last couple of years, we've had so many overseas and out-of-state buyers that have been buying C-class assets, putting terrible third-party managers in those properties, and they lose so much money a month. It's ridiculous. So B-class properties, it's easier to manage, easier to maintain, easier to collect rents, and realistically, I could manage 500 B-class apartments with the same effort as 100 C-class apartments.
That's fantastic, Zach. So talk about your management strategy. This really starts with you as an owner, really being very involved in your deals, as opposed to, we've seen a lot of deals that we bought because there was an absentee owner with third-party management, and that third-party management really ran the property into the ground. Obviously, there's a lot of good third-party managers, but just talk about your philosophy and how you manage your buildings.
Absolutely. So I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I've ever met anybody that says, when I grow up, I want to manage properties. Like it's a very, very challenging job. You're getting pulled in all these different directions. The tenant wants everything, the owner wants to spend nothing, and the city's also wants another list. So you're getting pulled in three different directions. So it's a very challenging position. Because of that, there are very few effective third-party managers. Leasing agents are paid on a commission structure where they're typically receive a portion, if not the full month's rent, in order for leasing that property out. The challenge, though, is there's no incentive if that tenant stays there for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years. So it's just very, very challenging to find an effective leasing property manager that's going to care about the property, the operations, as much as you would be interested in doing. Apartments have this stigma that they're passive income. When a private investor, when I raise capital, when Josh raises capital for a deal, those members are passive. They receive a check each month. There's nothing they have to do for that capital when they receive those checks. When I buy a property, it's a 2-year commitment, and it's thousands of hours to turn over all the units, remodel everything, lower expenses, dial in all the inefficiencies, get the marketing going, management, leasing, make sure advertising is spot on. It's a lot of effort, a lot of time, and I just have not found a third-party company that's really has been able to put forth that effort to do it. So we provide that service in-house. I've got 5 property managers that are full-time. They either handle one larger property, or I will have one property manager that will handle a variety of smaller properties in order to give her the volume that they would need. And with that, there's just a lot more energy control, a lot more we're able to do to really dial those properties in, and just really ensure that we are able to provide not only the return of investment to our investors, but the return of their capital as well.
And Jack, would you mind commenting on how do you pay? You don't have to give us the exact detail, but conceptually, how do you pay your property managers so they have an incentive to kind of babysit their projects that they're responsible for?
Absolutely. So, each one is a case-by-case scenario based upon the hours they put in, the experience they have, if they're new and they're being taught and trained, or whether they're coming in with 15 years experience. So that's going to definitely be a big part of it. Sometimes we'll even provide some bonuses based upon leasing, but I don't have leasing as a significant portion of their income, because I don't want decisions to be made that are sometimes short-sighted. I don't want their need to be able to pay their mortgage, their bills, their car payment to allow them to compromise the quality of the tenant that we have to bring in.
That's great. That's great advice. Yeah, appreciate that. And how do you keep in close communication with your passive investors? Tell us a little bit about your update strategy. whether it's emails, webinars, conference calls, newsletters? How do you do that? How do you do that?
Absolutely. So right now we primarily will communicate through email. If we have a video put together, photos, leasing updates, we'll provide that. But right now I've got about, last year I raised about $6 million of private capital, and I probably have roughly about 40-ish investors. So I'm also still trying to be able to connect with them, put phone calls into them, because right now I'm not at a list right now that it's so big that that's unmanageable to do that. But I think sometimes there's just a benefit for people to be able to hear your voice, see your face, and see what's going on with the properties and projects.
Gotcha. Fantastic. Jack, how about moving on to the next slide, just your verification process as an owner? Everybody talks about, whether you do in-house or out-of-house management, in-house or third party, whether you have in-house leasing or third-party leasing, whether you have your own contractors or out-of-house contractors. At the end of the day, you as the CEO and the owner have to double check on that stuff. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about your handbooks, your SOPs, and then what do you do on a daily, monthly basis to sort of spot check or double check the things that your staff is telling you? Like, hey, this building is, I'm turning over these units. Like, do you physically go drive to every property and check on every unit, or do you have some systems in place for that? So just, again, I think some guys that have maybe a smaller portfolio could be very hands-on and check every unit.
Sure.
But when you've got 800 units, 1,000 units, you're going to have potentially dozens of units turning over every single month, and
Sure.
you can't possibly check every single unit every single time. So how do you manage your staff? How do you manage your team?
Exactly. So that's been an evolving process. How we manage and run things today is not how I start off with. So I start off doing everything myself. Hot water tanks, furnaces, unit turnovers, but then obviously it got to a point that wasn't manageable. But the benefit is those years that I did that, it got me really grounded in the business of rent collections, evictions, turnovers, where I basically learned with like trial by fire. So today what we have is again, each property manager does an exceptional job of being able to manage their projects, but we're providing resources and assets for them. So checklists, KPIs, order sheets, and materials. If we have the ability, we build out material rooms at the property where we will set up shelving, and we will have 5, 10, 15 units of material. So when a unit turn comes available, we have the material that's sitting there. We have our flat rate sheets of what we will pay for those units. So then my project manager, Caleb, and myself will communicate with the various remodeling crews, get them into those units. We know what the pay is, the material's there. So we're able to take a lot of those complexities out. But right now, I have a lot of really good, just A+ team members on my team, and it took a long time to get there. We hired a lot of the wrong people through the years. We've made a lot of hiring mistakes. But through the years of doing that, we continue to make mistakes, learn from them, adjust the business plan, adjust the team members, adjust the process. And each time we lost money, we created a system, a process, a checklist because of that. So it wasn't overnight, but it continued to allow us to turn the screws up each time. But right now, my project manager, between the both of us, during the value add remodeling stage, we're at the projects multiple times a week. Our eyes are there. Our property managers are also another set of eyes. So if I rely on a project manager just to keep me accountable to the progress of the project, oftentimes you're not going to get all the time the full honest story on it, because if we're falling behind schedule, it's a reflection on them. So sometimes with other crews, you can get a little bit dishonest on that. The property manager is always going to be 100% honest. Either we're making progress, the quality where it needs to be at, we have some issues we have to correct. So between my in-house project manager, our property managers, myself, we're just keeping a really tight eye on these projects just to ensure that what's getting done and what's getting paid makes sense at the end of the day.
Got it. So you've got some tips here. about 6 things to do to be an effective manager. So tell us about that.
I mean, the biggest thing, you have to be involved. You have to know your business. You have to know your numbers. You have to know the strengths and weaknesses of your people, your crew, your property managers, so that you can make sure you have the right person in that seat. And if not, have a conversation, provide training, or make an adjustment. But you have to know what your occupancy on these properties are and what potential move-outs you can be having the upcoming months. If you have move-outs, if the tenants are not willing to re-sign leases, you have to start pushing marketing out, getting crews lined up, so when that unit becomes empty, you can turn it over. Collections, not just the capital you're collecting, but what tenants are not paying, because there's always going to be some that aren't paying, and making sure that you're effectively managing those 3-day, 30-day notices and payment plans. Adjusting eviction policies. So like right now with COVID-19, if we have a great tenant that's been paying for a year, months, or years, and they're going through a legitimate situation, like we would work with them, but at the same time, you have to be able to make sure that when those payment plans are supposed to be hitting, if they're not, you have to switch gears on that. Marketing process for leasing units. I think in another slide, we've got a number of things, but when we go to market a property, there's a checklist, and we're basically covering the entire gamut of marketing. Signs in front of the property will work. So like I'm all about the internet and social media, but the old traditional marketing tools still work. Do you have enough crews and the correct crews? So the best time to find remodeling crews is when you don't need them. You have to always be looking for deals. You have to always be looking for capital. You always have to be looking for crews at the same time. So don't get complacent because Johnny's been showing up and remodeling units. You're set with him. There's going to come a day that's going to fall apart. And then just also evaluating the effectiveness of each team. I've had team members that have came in, remodeling crews, where there's been issues. We've allowed them to continue because we didn't have a replacement for them at the time, but I knew we could do a lot better. So again, you have to make decisions with who's on board, but you also have to be always looking for other talents as well.
Yeah, that's great. You and I have laughed over the years, Jack, that even the best contractors sometimes only last 2 or 3 years. It's just part of the process with that part of the economy, that particular job. That it's sort of one of the hazards of being a contractor, if you will, is that these guys, the best contractor might last 2 years, and all of a sudden his truck breaks down, he's drinking too much, he's going through a divorce, and the guy falls off a cliff. So I firmly agree with you that the best time to be looking for crews is when you don't need them, to constantly be interviewing for those people, and then bring people in, test them out, because you're gonna lose a contractor at the absolute most unlikely time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Big deal. Absolutely. Big deal. All right, Jack, how about this next list? You put this together for our OLA members, 6 things not to do to be an effective manager. Tell us about this.
So don't be clueless about your operations. I can't tell you how many people will buy a property, put a third-party management option in there, and then they lose an ungodly amount of money. I just talked to somebody recently. They had a portfolio of single-family houses. They had about $250,000 that disappeared, and it's not uncommon. So you have, these are not passive investments. You have to be involved with them. Don't fully rely on third-party management without verifying information. So again, rent collections, leasing, marketing, and vacancies, you just have to verify the numbers and the information that's being provided to you. And I want to be clear, like I'm not shooting down every third-party management, but realize it's rare when you have an amazing third-party management option. And when you do, it's a blessing. Take care of them well, pay them well, bonus them, but just be aware. Don't have no one available to do site visits. So basically, we do spontaneous site visits because we want to check on the operations. How's the yard? How clean are the hallways? What issues do we have? Do we have smoke detectors that are chirping? Somebody has to be able to go out there and just keep an eye on the project occasionally, just to make sure that, also to evaluate the management option, that they're also catching those things as well. That doesn't mean we're expecting people to be perfect, but there's a difference between small minor issues and reoccurring constant issues. A lot of times your tenants will never meet you, and the condition of that property and the operations, it's a direct reflection of you. Don't lose track or control the cost of repairs and renovations, and this happens all the time. The best way I've been able to figure this through the years is if you have a car accident, you don't call your insurance company and say, hey, I need $5,000 to fix this. They tell you what they're willing to pay. So it's a very simple process of reverse engineering the process. And that's the same way we run our renovations in our crews. We take a look at the scope of project and what has to happen. We break everything down line by line. Demo, any plumbing, any mechanical work that has to get done, drywall, paint, and then we itemize each thing. Door stops, smoke detectors, handles, faucets, P-traps, toilets, vanity, cabinets, countertop, and we assign a dollar amount next to that. We provide a completely itemized breakdown to the contractor. This is what the job pays, and there's really nothing to argue about it. Either the numbers make sense or they don't, and it's very, very specific, and if we can control our cost on that, then all we have to do then is provide material. Right now, we have just incredibly low pricing from our vendors right now. The majority of our material comes from Lowe's. Instead of taking the retail price and providing a discount, we actually start off at cost and go slightly over that because of our volume. So it's been really effective. It's a process that we can control, and we duplicate unit after unit. So broken down relationships between property managers and tenants. It's not uncommon if you have a hothead property manager for bridges and relationships to get burned with tenants. And when that happens, the cost is catastrophic. The highest cost we have is tenant turnover. When that tenant leaves, we have to repaint the unit, possibly swap out flooring, other damages, other upgrades that are necessary. We are not collecting rent. We're putting money back into the unit, and then we have to pay to lease that unit out again. And that unit can be down for a month. It can be down for 3 months if it's, between like Christmas to February. So those relationships, it's just really critical that we treat people fairly and correctly. And last thing, ineffective marketing and stopping marketing during COVID-19. So for us, we have had probably the best leasing time right now during COVID-19. We are making precautions. We are keeping areas clean, but in reality, we're walking a prospective tenant down an empty hallway to an empty apartment. So, during this time, we've really been pushing marketing hard. It's been really effective for us. We've been getting a lot of properties leased up during this time.
That sounds great, Jack. Are you guys doing anything during your lease ups, like extra cleaning? Are your people wearing masks? Are contractors wearing masks? How are they doing with social distancing? Obviously, everybody's a little bit different how they feel about the risk. But in general, how are you guys managing that particular part of it?
Exactly. So if we're having contact with a tenant, wearing a mask is definitely being utilized. The other thing that's also being done is we're doing a little bit of some modifications to our leasing process. So what we'll do is we'll have the door. Typically, our leasing agent / property manager will tour the tenant to the property. So what we're also doing at this point is allowing them to do a self-guided tour. We'll be on the phone with them. We'll leave the apartment unlocked and let them walk through while we're on the phone, as well as we're doing, additional cleanings of door handles and areas that are being commonly touched. So, it's been safe, it's been effective, and it's been working out.
That's great. Yeah, like you said, I mean, it sounds pretty basic, but yeah, you're walking a tenant's walking themselves down an empty hallway into an empty unit, and
Sure.
It's not like they're putting their hands all over it, right? So
Exactly.
before they move in, have the property cleaned, wiped down. They can move in, they can wipe it down themselves, those kind of things. And especially after somebody moves out, the whole goal is to turn the unit. To do the new LVP flooring, to do the new backsplash, remnant granite, new vanities and toilets, and update the unit so you can charge a higher price. So in theory, that unit's been totally turned over. Any kind of germs and stuff are out of that unit. It's been totally cleaned. Now it's ready for a new lease and a new move-in.
Yes.
And so that whole unit's been turned over as it is. So pretty amazing stuff. Again, guys, if you have questions, comments for Jack, you can pump those into the the GoToWebinar chat box. I'll be happy to facilitate those questions over to Jack. We do have a lot of familiar faces on the line. Ernest Harabin's on. Franco, what's up, buddy? How are you? Jennifer, Ed Lightcamp. Ed doesn't ever seem to miss a webinar. He's on every single one of them. Dean Harder, what's up, Dean? Brian, Barry, Anthony, Roger, Shane, Suri, Theodore, Val, Vladimir, Peggy, Natalie, Lou Corolla, what's up, Lou? Carson, Justin, Julie, Hannah. I got a bunch of people on the line today. Again, primarily from Northeast Ohio and Ohio, but again, some of our students from other parts of the country, some of our followers from other parts of the country have snuck in to the Ohio Landlord Association meeting. So great, Jack. Let's talk about that kind of final topic here. And we do need to wrap up by 3 o'clock. So we've got about 10 minutes. But let's talk about stabilizing properties. So whether you're going in to buy a property from the beginning, you bought it and there's already vacant units, or you bought it and you need to evict some tenants and do some immediate turnovers, or it's the natural unit turn process. Somebody's been in there for a year, they're moving to a different apartment and you got to turn their unit. Talk about the crews, coordinating materials. You've done some of that already, but just on stabilizing your building, this is really where, if you bought it at a wholesale price, you're able to stabilize it, increase the rent, get a much higher value, and then refinance to pay your equity investors off. So big part, because that year or 2 or 3 years when you bought a building, all of your real money, all your forced appreciation happens in that 1 to 3 years up front. And then for the most part, you've hardened the asset, and it's not that you don't never have to touch it again, but a lot of it's been done. It's a lot of upfront work for a lot of long-term payoff. So obviously, very, very important here.
Yeah, so basically, we talked about it briefly before. In that stabilizing period for the first couple of years, we're always looking for additional crews, other vendors, and just constantly negotiating those price points. It's really important to be able to treat people well. And this is a lost art that a lot of people have never really realized or don't execute well. But I'm not looking, when I bring a crew in, of how little can I pay them. I want to find a price that's fair to them and that's fair to me, because time is money. The time that I'm making investor capital payments, we're paying a higher interest rate on a bridge loan. We have a deadline we have to hit. We can't afford to be losing good crews. So we do have to pay them well, communicate, say thank you. I appreciate what you're doing. Take care of them. And just be a good human being that they want to work with. Like we do business with people that we like and trust. And I want to have a relationship where these contractors like and trust me, and vice versa. I like and trust them as well. We've been pretty diligent in continually improving on just coordinating material vendors, crews, and leasing operations. So, again, we talked about that briefly, but it's taking a lot of years and a lot of money to really get that process dialed down. And essentially, again, it just comes down to if we're having a flat rate for a contractor to do work, we're going to penalize them if they don't have the material they need to get that job done. They're getting paid the same amount of money if it takes them a day or a week, and if it takes them a week, they're going to be gone. So we have to make sure material's there and it's being checked and coordinated, and our vendors can provide that material appropriately. We just got to keep a close eye on our financials of what we're spending, what we're bringing in, but we have to be able to track those, because when we go to refinance the property, your financials will be combed through. So we have a separate LLC, a separate EIN, separate bank accounts, debit cards, credit cards for each property. So that way, when we look at our monthly bank statements, if there's any discrepancies, we can identify that within those statements. If you're gonna be running multiple properties from the same account, it's gonna create a nightmare. And then the last thing is just like working with the right lenders. I can't tell you how many lenders that have approached me to say, we're the cheapest in town. And I used to be a guy that used to be going for cheap, and that's, oh my goodness, is that the wrong decision? Skilled labor isn't cheap, cheap labor isn't skilled. And the same thing with lenders. I have had so many lenders that have blown deals apart, and I've had amazing lenders, Josh being one of them, Chris Litzer being another one, that have been able to execute and take these, challenging deals. And the reason they're challenging, again, is because if we're buying at a wholesale price, We're buying it because there's inefficient financials. These properties are not like the ideal property that a lender wants to take on. You have to find lenders that can see the opportunity, evaluate you as an operator, and be able to see where you can take that property to provide that financing. Because what's different in the multifamily world, when you provide earnest money after your contingency period, which is typically 30 days, your earnest money is not refundable. So I can't tell you how many deals I've had between $50,000 to $150,000 of non-refundable earnest money, and if you can't produce, that money's smoked. So it's the cost of the lender becomes very expensive when you partner with the wrong people.
Absolutely. Jack, a couple words about marketing, and then we'll wrap up here at 3 o'clock. Again, any of you guys that are interested in talking with Jack, partnering with Jack, Jack, why don't you give out your phone number, email, website now, and then we'll wrap up here in the next few minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my cell phone is 440-552-8483, 440-552-8483. My website is Petrick Property Group. It's Petrick, propertygroup.com. You know, I've got a lot of deals here in Northeast Ohio, Brea, Brook Park, Parma, Euclid, Shaker Heights, Garfield Heights, Lorraine. If somebody, you know, had some questions or wanted to meet up, take a look at a property, I'd love to be of help if I could. But as far as marketing on a property, you know, as we're getting the renovations done, you know, we're losing a lot of money each month that a property is sitting vacant. Units are sitting vacant. So we have to really broadcast our marketing to catch the entire span. So AppFolio is a property management software. We're doing Facebook Marketplace, which is free. We're also paying to create paid Facebook ads, and Facebook is their method of marketing, to be honest. Craigslist signs at the property has been extremely effective. Yard banners, newspaper ads, postcards, mailings. We've even went to the point that I got a 123 unit apartment complex. It's a 55 and older senior building. So what we did is we went to our nearby competing apartments. We went to those apartments and took a look at how their apartments were numbered. Like apartment, you know, 101 to 102, 101 to 120, 201 to 220, you know, figure that out, and we're putting postcards and we're mailing directly to those apartment units. We don't have the tenants' names if we don't need it, if we address it to apartment 101. So again, just being creative and thinking out of the box of how can we find and market to those people.
That's fantastic, fantastic. And guys, listen, I've regularly recorded podcast content with Jack. Actually just recorded a podcast last week that is just going to be released next week. You can check that out at acceleratedinvestorpodcast.com. So I'll bring that up here real quick. So you guys can check that out. Make sure you guys check out the podcast with Jack and I, which is just released. We talk a lot about these same concepts, plus a lot more on top of that. And again, this was just released actually a couple days ago. It's podcast number 108, acceleratedinvestorpodcast.com. Jack has spoken on our stages before and a lot of our live events and those kind of things. So Jack, listen, really appreciate the content today. If anybody has any questions for me and my team, you can reach us at Freeland Properties at freelandventures.com. Again, our Ohio Landlord Association events we're hosting on the first Friday of every month. We hope very soon to be able to get back to doing these face-to-face. We'll see what happens with COVID-19. If we can get back to Fatheads maybe in June or July. If we are, you'll certainly get notices and notifications. I think everybody's going to be looking forward to celebrating, raising a glass and having a beer together. If we can do it in June, great. If it doesn't happen till July or August, that's fine too. Again, if you've got comments or questions for Jack, visit petrickpropertygroup.com. Otherwise, you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. We do need to wrap up in order to open up this line for another webinar that we're hosting at 3 o'clock. So thanks so much for participating in the Ohio Landlord Association. Make sure you visit our sponsor, David Streeter, again at 216-407-6644, dstreeter@deemerlaw.com. Thank you so much for being here, Jack. Fantastic job as always. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for attending, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.